Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone, episode number 127 for the 25th of March, 2011. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. What a mixed bag, an eclectic mix we have for you on today's show. We're going to kick off with an interview that our good friend and US correspondent Travis Roy conducted with Mark Mervine, all about the current situation and the worries in Japan with the reactors over there. Now Mark's going to explain to Travis and to us some of the concerns with the reactors and what can possibly be done. Very interesting interview. That's at the top of the show. Following that, we have the interview that was held over from last week, where Maynard has a word to Robbie Bonocussi, a recipient of a heart transplant. And I guess the message here, folks, is if you're not a donor, become one. After that, we've got a clip from a TV show here in Australia called The Circle, which is sort of like The View, sort of a mid-morning chat show. They recently had on their resident medico, Dr Deepa Daniel, discussing vaccination, and I thought the advice was pretty good, so we'll include that clip today. Then after that, it's visiting Radio 2GB. Once again, Dr Rachael and myself go in to see our good friend Glenn Wheeler. Now, this was recorded a few weeks ago, before the earthquake and tsunami in Japan, but it's all about psychics who reckon they can predict the future. Very interesting when you think about recent developments. And to round off the show, we have former Chief Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics, Barry Williams, with the short editorial he wrote about our famous Bend Spoon Award. Now, I've had an interesting time over the last 2 weeks. I've been converting various DVDs I've created over the years into NTSC format for North America. That's the Great Water Divining DVD from Australian Skeptics, the Rhyme Keeper, our voiceover man Jim Wilshire's own DVD about Australian poetry, and a DVD I did a few years ago with my good friend Gary Clark, DVD Origami. It's very exciting to have those now in NTSC format, but what a process that is to convert videos from PAL to NTSC. I hope I don't have to do that too often. More news about those DVDs in the coming weeks. But for now, sit back, grab a nice sausage sandwich, and enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
So this is Travis with the Skeptic Zone, and I'm sitting here with Mark Mervine to talk about the tragedy of the nuclear power plant getting hit by the earthquake and following tsunami.
I graduated from the Naval Academy in 1981 and went into the Navy nuclear power program and served in the submarine force. I was on a ballistic missile submarine, and then I also was part of the instructor staff and was an instructor at one of our land-based training facilities. After 6.5 to 7 years of active duty, I went into the reserves, and I went to work for Wisconsin Electric, which at the time, the ownership has changed, but at the time they owned a Westinghouse 2-unit nuclear power plant on Lake Michigan. And I worked there for a few years, and then I went to work for Vermont Yankee, which has a boiling water reactor, very similar in vintage and design to the ones in Japan. With respect to the venting that's been going on, when those reactors scrammed, the main steam isolation valves would have shut. That big steam path to the turbine is shut off.
Okay.
They have some safety systems that will kick in. In particular, they have one cooling system that is actually a steam-driven pump. That's kind of a twofold purpose. One is to take some of that steam that's in the reactor and kind of deplete it so that you don't get a huge pressure spike. And the second, obviously, is you take a steam-driven pump and you use that to pump water back into the reactor. So it's kind of like a win-win. What happened about an hour after the plant shut down was, of course, the tsunami. which, we've all seen the pictures from the television of how big of a wave of water that was.
Yeah.
Somewhere between 20 and 30 feet. They would have been running on their diesel generators because apparently the grid was knocked out of service due to the earthquake. And what that did is that flooded where the diesel generators were and where a lot of their electrical switchgear was. They were down to just batteries. All of the pumps that you need. So it's great that we have the steam-driven pump that's going to take the steam and then pump water back into the reactor. But somewhere along the line, you have to cool that.
Right.
Which means you need a pump that's taking water out of the ocean, pumping it through a heat exchanger, and back out. They lost all of those seawater cooling pumps, and then they also lost, because of lack of electricity, the other pumps that would have been part of multiple redundant safety systems. High-pressure coolant injection, low-pressure coolant injection, there are HR pumps for decay heat removal. All of that equipment was rendered inoperable due to the lack of electricity. And after some period of time, it was pretty obvious that they weren't going to get electricity back. They really had to go to plan D or F, which was, how do I get any water into those reactors? And that was through the use of basically portable firefighting pumps, which are relatively low pressure. Well, the water's not going to flow into the reactor if the reactor pressure is higher than that.
Right.
Which with steam in there, it normally would be.
Right.
So they have to vent some of that off so that the water would flow in.
Right, they're basically replacing the steam with water.
Well, they got to take some steam out to reduce the pressure so that it's below whatever that pump can put out so the water would flow in.
The pictures I've looked at, you see the containment building, and then you see the reactor inside of it. Are they pumping this water directly into the reactor or the containment around the reactor?
Into the reactor itself.
Okay. Now, the steam that they're venting would be radioactive then?
In fact, it's very radioactive because there was a matter of a number of hours where they didn't have any cooling.
Right.
Which meant that the fuel was damaged. And we know the fuel was damaged for a number of different reasons. One, we had these big explosions. What exploded was hydrogen. How we got hydrogen was we got that cladding around the fuel up to at least 2200 degrees Fahrenheit, where the zirconium interacted with water to form zirconium dioxide. The hydrogen was released. So when they vented the steam, there was hydrogen in the reactor. And they eventually vented enough of it into the secondary containment to the point where they got enough hydrogen up there that they reached an explosive concentration. And we had explosions in both the number 1 and number 3 reactor buildings. And you can see from the pictures how extensively damaged those buildings are.
Yeah, it's just a frame now.
So the other way that we know that we have fuel damage is we're able to detect the fission products such as cesium and iodine in the environment.
Yeah, so how damaging would that be to people, and how wide of an area?
Without knowing the specific concentrations in the samples, you really couldn't answer that question.
Yeah.
Somebody's doing the samples and getting the data now. We were very lucky that the winds were blowing from the west to the east, which was taking most of the radioactivity out over the ocean. Now, obviously, winds don't blow in one direction all the time. Also, depending on the amount of radioactive particles released, some of them are going to settle in and around the plant. And we know from the news in the past 24 hours that they have detected cesium and iodine in spinach, milk, and other agricultural products.
You mentioned that the fuel was damaged, and we could tell it because of the hydrogen and the explosions. Now,
and the fission products.
And the fission products. So now, would that lead you to believe that the core went into at least partial meltdown, or would you go that far?
I think any reasonable analysis of the situation would lead you to believe that we've got some fairly significant core damage in each of those 3 reactors, as well as the spent fuel in the Unit 4.
With regards to the actual reactor, when a core goes into partial meltdown or full meltdown, what does that mean exactly, and what can happen?
Until we're able to get into a recovery mode, and probably months, if not years from now, when we're actually able to have these plants cool down, not only temperature-wise, but radioactivity-wise, to allow either the pressure vessel head to be removed or allow for cameras to be sent in to look at the core. We won't really know the extent of the damage. whether we have fuel rods that have blistered, whether we've actually got some warping of the fuel, or whether we have substantial melting of part of the fuel. It's impossible to say at this point in the game. If I were to hazard a guess, I would say that there's probably a percentage of the core in those three units that is melted.
And we'll just say worst case scenario. Say you had a total core meltdown. If the core goes into meltdown, then you can't control the nuclear reaction.
Potentially.
Right. So if that continued to go on, what would be the fallout from that? Could it blow up? Could it?
The problem is it would make the situation worse. The reactor was shut down, and it's still generating a substantial amount of heat.
Right.
If you were to have a situation where the neutron population was to start to go back up, and the reactor power would be going up, then you're going to be generating even more heat, making the situation even worse. Blow up is not the word that I would use. However, with that being said, we know that when you get to 2200 degrees, that zirconium does interact with the water and form hydrogen. And the hydrogen was, what caused the explosions. It is definitely a concern that you get hydrogen in the reactor itself. Fortunately, normally there's no big source of oxygen that could cause an explosion. So it's pretty unlikely that the fuel would explode per se.
Yeah.
Especially given that we know that we have some water in there. If you had no water in there, a more likely scenario would be it would melt through the metal of the reactor vessel into the containment building. How far it would go in the containment building, which is steel and concrete, would depend on whether you could get water in there or not.
Okay, and if it potentially got out of the containment vessel, that would be really bad.
Yeah, it would be a really bad movie. Everybody remembers the China syndrome.
Yes, and I've heard
I don't know
term
what we
used.
would call it over there because China's, of course, right next door.
Right.
So I don't know whether we call that the Brazil syndrome or what. But it's hard to answer these hypothetical questions. Given the reality of where we are, we have water in there. The situation now is not good, but it's. I think I explained for the last couple of days in my interviews. At least it's not getting worse every day.
Right.
I hesitate to call it stable, but relatively speaking, a week ago, every day you turn on the news, it was getting worse every day.
Yeah.
Now it's getting a little bit better. The situation is stable within the context of how we want to use that word. Yeah. But they're definitely not out of the woods yet.
Now the other thing that I've heard talked about is that since the outer buildings have had explosions in them, and like you said, one of them was really mangled, how are they able to even get in there to do stuff and to vent like they've been doing and to get water into the reactor? All these systems must be damaged.
Well, but what you can see is the very tippy top of the building.
Yeah.
Which is where the refueling deck is and the spent fuel pool, and the crane that allows you to do refueling and remove the head of the reactor and that type of thing. Everything else is down lower, and the question is how much damage do we have down lower in the reactor building? All of the pumps and heat exchangers that we would need to cool the reactor would be down lower. They're not up there on that refueling deck.
All right, I got you.
So my hope is most of that is not damaged. And since there's multiple redundant systems, that they'll at least be able to get one system working in each of those buildings. I think from a command and control perspective, I don't know whether they changed who's in charge or what, but they seem to be going about it a lot better now than they were a few days ago. They did quite a bit of work at units 5 and 6 to stabilize those, and those units now are not so much of a worry. And they're going to start with their restoration efforts on Unit 2, whose building has the least damage. There was an explosion, but nothing to the extent of the other buildings. So externally, you don't even really see any damage in that building.
Right.
And so hopefully they'll restore some cooling to that one and get that one under control, and then turn their attentions to units 1, 3, and 4.
with what had happened after the tsunami hit, with the power problems and everything else, do you think that there was some significant human error that was done to create this kind of situation, letting the water level get too low in the spent fuel pools, not having, and not even just from that, from the aftermath, but just from planning, where the generators and stuff got knocked out so easily?
You hate to be a backseat driver, but I was surprised when they started having trouble with the spent fuel pools. Knowing that they had fire pumps available, and typically at a power plant, you'll have an auxiliary operator that would tour around the building and inspect the building at least once an hour. So normally, somebody should have been going up to the refueling deck and checking on the spent fuel pool, the temperature, the water levels every hour. You would have thought that once they first noticed that the temperature was going up or the water level was going down, that they would take one of the fire hoses and use that to refuel the pool. Had they done that, we wouldn't have had the explosion and all the damage at Unit 4. In my opinion, that was a mistake that shouldn't have happened. But, it's hard to second guess because you don't know what the circumstances were that were going on at the time. I mean, there's 3 other reactors having partial fuel meltdowns, explosions, probably high radiation levels. Maybe it was to the point where nobody could get up to that pool. There was no way to get a fire hose up there and refill it. I don't know, but we could have done without the spent fuel pool problems. And had we not had that to deal with, I think the plant would be a lot farther along in the recovery, because I really think that a lot of the high radiation levels have been caused by the issues that they've had with the spent fuel pools. And obviously a lot of attention and focus, helicopters, fire trucks, all those type of things now, trying to get some water back on those pools that perhaps could have been avoided.
Right. And I guess my last question will be, how common are these types of plants, and what other types of plants?
So around the world, most of the reactors are either pressurized water reactors or boiling water reactors. And there's actually quite a few designs out there. At this site, the Unit 1 at Fukushima 1 actually achieved criticality, I think, in 1970 and went into commercial operation in 1971. Well, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
That's 40 years ago. So nothing stands still. And in fact, in the 70s and 80s, the designs were evolving fairly rapidly, especially as more and more safety regulations were put in place and more safety requirements. The designs evolved quite rapidly. And in fact, at Unit 6 at this site, the first 5 units have a Mark I containment design. Unit 6 has a Mark II. Then there was a Mark III. So there's been an evolution of the boiling water reactor design. And the same is true for the pressurized water reactor design. The smaller ones originally were what we call 2-loop plants, where there's 2 steam generators. There was kind of an intermediate size that had 3 loops, and then some of the larger ones had 4. Originally, this technology was developed and engineered in the United States, and the big players were Westinghouse and General Electric. Over time, license agreements were done, and so the French started off with Westinghouse plants, but then took that design and essentially came up with their own designs. And now they have their own company that sells nuclear power plants around the world. And also, Westinghouse was sold. And I think, I got to get this right, I think it's actually owned by Toshiba. And I think it's GE that has the partnership with Hitachi in the nuclear business. The Koreans have developed their own nuclear power plant technology. Originally, when they first did power plants in Korea, they bought the designs from the traditional suppliers. But now they've developed their own designs. Probably what most people are interested in was, okay, if we were going to build a nuclear power plant today, what kind of design would it be? I've been out of the industry for some years, so I'm not 100% up to speed. The newest design from Westinghouse is called the AP1000. And the big difference between that plant and the plants that were built in the 70s and 80s is there's a lot more passive safety systems. The big problem at Fukushima was you needed electricity. you needed the operators to be able to do some things. The automatic systems kicked in, but when they lost power, everything quit working. And then it required people. A lot of people that worked very hard to try to minimize this. Those fire hoses didn't get hooked up by themselves. Those generators didn't just show up by themselves. I mean, a lot of people have worked very hard to get us to where we are now, and hopefully we're on the verge of every day getting good news coming from that site. But the newer designs, like the AP1000, I think the latest design from GE is called the ES-BWR, have a lot more passive features. And the Westinghouse one is designed to go 72 hours without anybody having to do anything and no electricity being required. So had we had new Westinghouse AP1000s at this site, we could have gone 3 days without needing any water, any electricity. And we would have obviously been a lot better off than we were with the plants of the vintage that we have now.
Wow.
Part of the problem here is not really the design of the plants. Clearly, the new generations are going to be better and safer. The problem is when you build a plant, you design to a certain design basis, certain size earthquake, certain size tsunami. All those are taken into account in terms of how you put the plant together. And somebody asked me a question about, well, what's the difference between a plant that's in a place where it's geographically stable and one that may be in a place where you might have a lot of earthquakes? And I had the plants that I worked at were in fairly geologically stable areas, but I had a chance to go do an inspection at Trojan Nuclear Plant in Oregon, which it's now shut down, but obviously it wasn't at that time. And it was amazing to me to see the differences in the plants, how many additional supports they had on the piping, all these hydraulic dampers, all the different things that had to be taken into account because the geology of the area and the chance for larger earthquakes. But in this case, I don't know what the actual design basis was, but nobody planned on a 9.0 earthquake, and certainly nobody planned on a 30-foot tsunami.
Yeah, clearly.
That's why I'm saying whether or not we would restart units 5 and 6, what we have to look at and say is it safe to restart them even if we could?
Right.
Given that we now know that we can have a 9.0 earthquake and a 30-foot tsunami, it may turn out that particular site is not a place where you want to have a nuclear power plant anymore.
Right.
And they're going to have to look at other sites in Japan. I don't know what the site actually looks at the Fukushima 2 plant, which is about 7 miles away, and how much damage they incurred from the tsunami, and what the site looks like in terms of how well protected that plant is as well. And there may be others that have to be looked at around the world in terms of the actual physical height of the plant and where the safety equipment is located versus the chance of something more significant than what we originally designed the plants for.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And,
Hey, bro.
Hey, bro, what's this message you sent me about $1 million?
SkepticBros.com have finally cracked it. A detection device that will prove the existence of the paranormal.
What?
Let me show you.
Hey, ow, ah! Why are we in a cupboard?
Check it out, a new placebo band.
And it's glowing.
Yes, in the dark. That's when the ghosts are about. We're gonna win Randy's $1 million.
I'm going home. Let me out.
Can't. Cupboard only opens from the outside.
No!
Go to Skeptic Bros. Get a glow-in-the-dark placebo band. Where you gonna go? SkepticBros.com.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
You can talk about your worlds of science fiction. You can talk about your Star Trek. You can talk about your Star Wars. You can fly around the universe in a blue phone box. But when you have one heart transplanted from one human being to another, and the guy who got it's Robbie here. Man, Robbie, I've known you for a while. I haven't seen you for a while. Only 5 weeks ago, you had another heart put inside your chest. People with hip operations don't get up that fast. You're like, man, what's it like?
Oh, mate, it's fantastic. I mean, really, for being so sick and suddenly out of nowhere to get told you're going to live.
Robbie, was it a degenerative heart disease or a specific disease you had?
I had swine flu. So basically I had the flu, and from the flu caused major heart damage, and I died about 5 times. So it was pretty heavy. I mean, it was... I just got a photo of the Green Reaper, so I had to get out because it was a Green Reaper walking around the convention, so I had to get that one.
And you got a photo of yourself giving him the finger, no doubt.
Yeah.
Not this time, buddy. Because we hear about how dangerous the swine flu was, and most people go, oh, yeah, you know. Most people, you know, I'm not in that group, I won't get vaccinated and everything, but you're an example of the most vulnerable group. You were someone with a problem, and swine flu got you, and then you needed a new heart.
Yeah, that's right. And remember, not all of us get it. It's very sad when you sit down and go for a clinic and you see so many people sick with lungs and heart. How many people are waiting? And there's a lot of people waiting, so donate. I mean, that's the main thing I say to people. Talk to your family like the ads go. Because at the end of the day, even if you got on your licence or you got your own card, it doesn't mean jack, because it's your mum or dad or it's your partners who make that decision. So tell them your wishes, you know. And the fact is, the young boy who died was 25, who gave me a chance to live. I've got 2 children, and he gave 7 of us life. And that family, at the worst time in their lives, gave us life.
Robbie, as someone who has worked their life in sci-fi and fantasy, you died a couple of times. You've been through what only a couple of years ago would be a scientifically impossible operation. Did you see any bright lights? Was there a tunnel? Did the Grim Reaper come along from Family Guy and say hello? What was going on?
I was waiting for that. I was hoping to see a light, which scares me because I'm going, oh no, I didn't see any light. I don't know. I just knew it wasn't my time when they brought my wife in. This is a true story now. This is really true. They said, do I want to get my last rites and all that? And I had a mask on, and I took it down, and all the doctors and nurses are standing there. I go, Jedi Knight! Put it back on. Now, all of them were so serious because they were working very hard on me, and they all cracked up. I thought it was funny. It made everyone calm down a little bit.
Well, that's better than saying atheist, because it's really going to confuse them no end. Have we got one of them? We got one downstairs?
Even when I was dying, that nerd in me came out. For me, Maynard, you didn't see me for a couple of years, but I was pretty sick near the end.
And even looking at you now to when I saw you a couple of years ago before, the colour's back in the face, the dark rings that even I've still got under my eyes are gone under your eyes there, man. So is there anything like you can't do now you've got the heart there? Like, you don't want to smoke or drink too much there, but...
You don't want to do that. I mean, the main thing is respect my donor, and that's a big thing, is they get through our heads. We've been given life. I think a bizarre thing was I was ready to die, and I was at that stage, when I was going to die in 3 months, and you sight your head up for death. Then suddenly they come in and open a window, basically a blind, and say to you, go live your life. And that's bizarre, because, you've sighted yourself up because, I've been there. I don't want to ever do that again. I want to see life. The great surgeons and the great nurses and the people down at St. Vincent's and what our Aussie doctors doing and our Aussie nurses are fantastic, man. We're the best in the world, mate. It's just sad seeing some of the equipment. Most of the equipment is donated. We've got the best in the world, and all our equipment's donated.
Robbie Bonocussi, it's great chatting to you. It's great seeing you up and around only after 5 weeks with the new heart. Many more years there. So 25-year-old heart, that means you're going to live to be 170, doesn't it?
Yeah, I hope so.
Do you get anything from the heart? People say you get a heart transplant and you get some of the person's emotions or something. Is that true, or is this just the drugs they give you?
I don't know. Now, doctors say no, right? Nurses and transplant patients say yes.
So what do you got? A 25-year-old, so have you been hooning in the car more than normally? What's been going on?
Drinking much rana. My thing is, I was a soft drink nut. I love Coca-Cola. I love soft drink, and I can't take soft drink now at all. At all. I just hate the taste. And it's not... I don't know, it was bizarre. I just can't put soft drink. I drink fresh juices, water, milk...
So it doesn't sound like a bad change. That sounds like something you should have done anyway.
Everyone's saying that anyhow. But I mean, for me, that was a mind-blowing, and coffee and tea. I'm not into... I own coffee shops. I can't drink coffee, and I can't drink teas, herbal tea, And that's weird. And the guy who got the lungs... he went in at the same time as me, so my double lung guy, and he's been in the country. He's a big Dutch bloke, and he's been here 30 years, and he hated Weetabix, and now he's obsessed of eating Weetabix, and he got out in a hospital the same as me with soft drink. I couldn't drink soft drink, so And we got told our guy was a very healthy triathlete. You never know, and they don't like talking about it because people get turned off of that DNA going into someone. But all I can say is that family, he lives on in us.
Robbie Bonocussi, you're obviously going to tell people to make sure they not only they tick the donation box on their licence, but they discuss it with their family.
That's the main thing. Talk to your mum and dad. Talk to your partners. Talk to your loved ones. Tell them what your wishes are. Because at the end of the day, ticking your licence, doing even the donor's card means jack if they don't know your wishes. You know, it's very important because remember, 7 people live today because someone sat down and talked to their family.
5 weeks and you're up and around.
Yeah.
I need to lie down 2 days after a big weekend.
Yeah, I know. This is great. But thank you, Maynard.
AstronomyCast takes a facts-based journey through the cosmos as it offers listeners weekly discussions on astronomical topics ranging from planets to cosmology. Hosted by Fraser Kane of Universe Today and myself, Dr. Pamela Gay of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, this show brings the questions of an avid astronomy lover directly to an astronomer. Together, Fraser and I explore what is known and being discovered about the universe around us. Join us each week as we take a facts-based journey through the cosmos at astronomycast.com.
Here's a clip from the TV show The Circle, here in Australia on Channel 10, where the panel discuss flu vaccination.
It's almost flu season, and this year parents are getting some mixed messages about whether or not to give their kids a flu shot. For her view on this issue, we welcome back to The Circle our doctor on call, Deepa Daniel. It really is a time when people, some experts are saying yes, you definitely should, and some are saying you definitely shouldn't. What's your call?
Well, look, I think that most Australian doctors would be very much in favour of vaccinating kids against the flu, especially given that we still have deaths and definitely quite a few hospitalisations in kids, especially with flu-like or flu-related illness.
Yeah.
The controversies come up because last year, with one particular brand of flu vaccination, there was a higher risk of what we call febrile convulsions. It was about 1 in every 100 kids vaccinated under the age of 5 or so. Now, this is one particular brand, and in Australia we were quite lucky in that as soon as something like this happens, the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, comes in, they recall the batch, and they decide why it's happened and how we should safely proceed. Now, it's deemed safe at the moment that we use the 2 other brands of flu vaccination, but certainly that one brand that caused the problems, we're not vaccinating kids anymore with that brand.
Deepa, the thing I always hear is the way the vaccinations are grown and sort of created is by using last year's flu. So there's a whole new batch of yucky strains of flu that we're not able to vaccinate against, so it's a little bit pointless and it's a little bit like a placebo.
Well, we actually know that it definitely... So there's very good research out to suggest that it does... we are able to predict the strains based on... We're very lucky because Europe, the US, they have the flu before we do. And so based on that, we're able to predict the strains that will most likely be the strains causing problems. Unfortunately, with the flu, the virus changes constantly. And so it changes its surface proteins, which means if it changes and becomes what we call a pandemic or a new epidemic, we can't actually predict those changes. And so, you know, there is always a risk that there will be a new flu, but even then, the flu vaccine has been shown to decrease the severity of those new illnesses.
Yeah, that's right, and that's a bonus. Now, anyone can get an immunisation, but who should be getting it?
Yeah, so at the moment there's controversy because some experts are suggesting that we put the flu vaccination into the current immunisation schedule for children. Now, that isn't yet the case. So whilst it's recommended for all Australians, it's strongly recommended for certain groups who are at risk of significant complications. So these are complications like pneumonia, heart problems, liver problems, blood problems because of the flu. These people are anyone over the age of 65. They should definitely be getting the flu vaccine, and they should be getting it free. Indigenous people over the age of 15, pregnant women, and we know that pregnant women for some reason are more susceptible to the flu virus, and that can be at any time during their pregnancy at all. And finally, anyone over the age of 6 months who has a chronic illness that puts them at that higher risk. So that could include asthma, it can include heart problems, it can include immunity problems that happen like with diabetes and things. So there are a lot of people in that group who would get a free vaccination. So speak to your GP about whether or not that's appropriate for you.
Now, Georgie had a prem baby.
Yes.
Should she get that, Molly?
Look, about the age of 6 months, she should have a really serious discussion with her GP as to whether or not that's the best thing for her. It also includes how much you're amongst other children, how much you're amongst other people who might be a reservoir for infection.
How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel all groggy and yuck?
The flu vaccination? The flu vaccination can give you what we call a flu-like illness. It's not a live virus, so it can't give you the flu. Even if you get a little bit of fever, a little bit of, feeling unwell, a bit of a cough, cold, you're not contagious. So you're not going to spread that onto anyone, and that tends to last 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask exactly the same question, because is it in fact a small portion of the flu?
No, it's a changed surface protein. So it's been completely deactivated, and it's not a live virus at all.
So why do you get a little bit sick when you get it?
That's part of your immune response. So by giving a small portion of a virus or a changed portion of a virus, we're trying to stimulate the immune response, and in doing so, unfortunately, you can get those side effects, which again are much less severe than the actual flu. The actual flu is quite debilitating. It takes about 7 to 10 days to get better from it, and so it's a very specific, quite debilitating illness.
And you get those crusties around your nose when it's all dry. Thank you, Dr Deepa Daniel, for your information.
Marit. Og jeg Kristin, og vi vil tipse deg som norsk lytter av Skeptic Zone om skeptikermiljøet i Norge. Det finnes norske blogger og pubtreff og podcast, og foreningen Skepsis driver med slikt som disse du hører på nå. Sentralt skepsis.no, og her publiseres det dyptgående artikler, en kalender over aktiviteter og lenker til nyttige ressurser. Skepsis-bloggen oppdateres jevnlig, og det diskuteres heftig på forumet, så stikk innom og delta du også. Skepsis.no.
If only we could look into the future. It's a very interesting topic, and Dr. Rachael and I, a few weeks ago, went to Radio 2GB and discussed this very topic with our good friend, Glenn Wheeler.
From our report on the ground there, Natalie Peters, the story's just getting worse, quite frankly. As the death toll rises, some 145, 150 confirmed dead and still 200 missing. It's just an absolute disaster. And in this country alone, we've seen parts of the country ravaged by bushfires. We've had floods. We've had the recent cyclone, of course. And then, on Tuesday of last week, a devastating earthquake which has all but destroyed Christchurch. They're saying now a third of the city will have to be rebuilt. On the international scene, of course, there's been other upheaval. There's been civilian revolutions on a major scale in Tunisia, in Egypt and in Iran. So where are the modern-day Nostradamuses? Why haven't the gurus of psychic wizardry been able to foresee such events and be able to warn people of the impending dangers and thereby help save lives? Surely, if the people who purport to be experts at being able to see the future and tell us what's going to happen in the next 12 months, surely if they're half fair income, then disasters of this scale should appear on their radar. I would have thought so anyway. Dr Rachael Dunlop and Richard Saunders from the Australian Skeptics join us live in the studio to discuss it in a little bit more detail. Hi guys, thank you for coming in.
Hi Glenn.
Good evening, Glenn.
How is it that they can talk to the dead, predict fluctuations in currency, tell us about, Hollywood marriages which they think will survive or fail according to how they feel at the time, and yet it would seem, to my reckoning, none of this has been predicted, and we're less than 2 months into the year.
It's been an amazing year, as you were saying, news-wise, just staggering, in fact. And you know what, Glenn? I don't like to use the word prediction because it's not a good word. It's not accurate. I think the word guessing is the best word. We've got people out there who call themselves psychics and clairvoyants, and every year, at the end of the year, towards the end of the year, they will make lots of guesses, like we all can make lots of guesses. Some of those guesses will come true. Some of those guesses will be sort of a bit iffy, but they'll say they're true. And most of their guesses, in fact, last year, in their own magazine, the Psychics Directory, the year before, they made all sorts of predictions for 2010. And we carefully analysed all their predictions. Australia's top psychics, they got 93% wrong. So if someone comes along and calls themselves a psychic or clairvoyant and they've got predictions or guesses for the next year, you can bet your next hot dinner, but they will be something like 90 or 80, 90% wrong. Absolutely wrong. So it's no surprise. Of course they can't see these major events coming.
So how do they... Okay, but on that basis, though, how do they... And I did try to make contact with a couple of, prominent, well-known prominent psychics to come on the program tonight and be available by phone to basically, counter the argument that they can't see the future, because if they could, they would have predicted some of this stuff. Yeah. How can they purport then to be psychic when this sort of stuff on a major scale it's happened within 2 months of the year? I mean, it was only December that we had anybody who was anybody in the psychic world saying, here are my predictions for 2011. Oh, and by the way, if you want to buy them, it's 55 cents a minute.
That's right.
Well, the problem is, Glenn, nobody checks up on them. I mean, we're probably the only people that bother to read the 2009 Australian Psychics Directory and then look back and see if what they've said about 2010 is correct. So every year they're sort of wheeled out onto a current affair or the shows that do that stuff at the end of the year, but then nobody goes back to check. So if nobody's going to say, hey, you didn't get it right, then no one knows. So it doesn't matter.
I saw you sent me through the top predictions for 2011, which is really quite fascinating. The one that I thought was just outstanding was by a fellow called Brett Vollis, who I've never heard of, but obviously in some part of the world he must be famous.
I guess so.
Who says Prince William and Kate Middleton will confirm they are expecting not long after their marriage.
Well,
stop the presses.
That's amazing.
Stop the presses. Oh, hold the phone.
In other news, Glenn, circles are round. But as you said before, this stuff is not helpful,
Well, hang on. No, Rachael, don't get too carried away, because he goes on to say, after he says that they're expecting not long after their marriage, he goes on to say twins show up as a, wait for this, great possibility.
What does that mean? Does that mean it's going to happen or not?
Well, I think he's right, though. He is 100% correct.
It's possible.
It's possible.
Because it is a great possibility that twins will show up if they do confirm they're expecting not long after their marriage. Now, not long could be 2 years?
It could be anything. But again, if it happens, if by the end of the year we discover that they're expecting twins, they'll be crowing. The psychics will be crowing. If it doesn't happen, who cares? It's gone. It vaporizes. Yeah. But the one that caught my eye was this year, someone by the name of Jade Sky made this prediction. At the end of last year, they made this prediction. Major flooding will occur for the eastern seaboard of Australia. Ooh. Until I looked at the website of the Bureau of Meteorology and I discovered that major flooding occurs every year on the eastern seaboard of Australia.
It's similar, Richard, to in 2009, one of the psychics said there's going to be an earthquake on the San Andreas fault line, Glenn. Now...
when isn't there?
It's a fault line.
That's why it's called the San Andreas fault line.
So,
but again, I keep coming back to the very serious aspect of all of this, that right now, as we sit here and talk about this, that Christchurch has been decimated by an earthquake.
Yep.
And in none of this literature that you've got, which covers a whole bunch of hot predictions for 2011 with so-called experts, not one of them said Christchurch, New Zealand, or even somewhere in the South Pacific.
Yeah.
Nowhere.
Well, as sad as Christchurch is, and it's desperately sad, Rachael, you've got one there just to remind us all that there was a huge earthquake in Haiti not so long ago, last year.
Yeah.
And as sad as the death toll in New Zealand is, the death toll in Haiti was many
It was
times
230,000 or something.
Right?
I mean,
you can't. I'm
This
I'm
is
not
not a
comparing.
competition.
It's not comparing them, but they didn't see that at all. Look, the bottom line is, Glenn, these people make their living by making lots of predictions. There's that word, lots of guesses. Some they'll do, they'll try and get it really specific. A lot of them are vague. And year after year after year, who cares? They just keep making their money and making these wild guesses in some situation.
Joined in the studio by Dr. Rachael Dunlop and Richard Saunders from the Australian Skeptics. If you have a comment or a question that you'd like to put to us, then jump on the phone right now. 131 873 is the number, 25 to 9. All right, Rachael Dunlop and Richard Saunders, my guests in the studio, just talking about the fact that we've had all of these major earth-shattering, devastating things happen in less than 2 months of the year, and yet none of them saw it coming.
No, well, of course not. I mean, let's look at this with our real glasses on here, Glenn. People can't look into the future. People can make lots of guesses. They can make educated guesses. They can predict the market. That's a good use of the word.
So we keep coming back to the old placebo effect routine. If it feels good for you and you like the sound of what you're getting, go for it. Because one of the psychics that I did contact today and left a number for him to call me, I note on his website says, do you, apart from all the other business about how he can tell you what's going on in your life, he says, do you need clarity and guidance in your life today? If so, call one of my team of world-rated readers now for a live session. It's available. I should do a live read here. If so, call one of my team of world-rated readers now for a live session. It's available 24/7. Choose from astrology, tarot, numerology and more, whichever speaks to your inner wisdom. Get your first 10 minutes for only 59 cents a minute by calling and then only $3.95 per minute. For credit card callers. No credit card? Then call us on our new number to speak to the next available reader. $4.95 per minute. Higher rates apply to calls made from a mobile phone. I just sat there and looked at that when I was doing this afternoon. I thought, at 59 cents a minute and then $3.95 a minute for credit card callers, so you get the first 10 minutes for 59 cents a minute. So in that first 10 minutes, they would be trained to string it out and draw you in. So you've spent $5.90. For 10 minutes, and then you're paying $3.95 a minute. So let's say you spend then another 10 minutes. So a 20-minute call wouldn't be unrealistic. Another 10 minutes is going to be $39.50 on top of the $5.90. So you've spent $45.
They could ring us. It's a lot cheaper. We'll have a chat to them.
I still come back to the fact that, in the common sense of day-to-day life, if these people really could see the future, they should be waving big flags from the top of buildings going, guys, get out of Christchurch, there's an earthquake on its way. Get out of North Queensland, there's a cyclone on its way. We've got some calls. Hello, Margaret. How are you tonight?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
I'm ringing to see if there's any evidence that a premonition can be true. I'm a skeptic, but... On Monday, I have a friend who is not in any way thinks she's got powers or anything, and she rang me quite distressed because she said she felt fearful. And I said, are you frightened of somebody? And she said, no. I said, what's the fear about? She said, I don't know. I just feel like heavy and fearful. And the very next day, we had the earthquake in Christchurch, and I don't know whether it was that or what. Do you believe in premonitions?
Well, that's drawing a very long bow indeed. I mean, you could have then related that to any sadness around the world or any bad event. People have uneasy feelings from time to time. We all do. It's natural. It's part of being human. Every now and then, one of those uneasy feelings will hook up with something maybe dramatic in our personal lives or around the world.
So it's just coincidence?
Absolutely, yes. There's also something very interesting called the law of very large numbers. If you have a population, especially in the United States, of millions and millions of people, every night someone will dream about a close relative dying, and guess what? It'll happen because it has to happen because of the huge numbers involved. And you get to hear about it. They say, on the news today, this woman dreamt about her husband dying, and he did. And everyone goes, oh,
Which is a bit like, Richard, when people say things happen in threes. It's terrible. I've learned of a death of a friend. I've learned of somebody else that's been diagnosed with cancer. I'm hating to see what the third one's going to be. And you've only got to think very quickly. And there'll be a third thing. You can always think of a third thing. It's not hard.
It's not hard. But if there's not, eventually you'll forget it.
Yeah.
You only ever remember when there are three, Glenn, not when there are three. That's the thing, you see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Margaret, thank you for the call. Hi, Donna.
Hi, Glenn.
Hi.
I'm just wondering why you haven't got a psychic in there, because I think, and with your psychic predictions, I lie in bed and laugh, but because there's only 1 to 9 numbers in numerology, and then there's a master number of an 11 and a 20 toes.
Yeah, I can answer your question, Donna, by saying this, that I tried, and I said before, I actually have said in this chat I've had with these guys tonight, that I did put the call out to a number of psychics to try and get them on the show tonight to counter the argument. So I have...
Do you want me to leave a number of the New South Wales Psychic of the Year for 2007, 2008?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that I actually know them. One of the numbers that I did contact today, no names, no pack drill, was the New South Wales Psychic of the Year 2011. I thought it was far more relevant than the one from 2008 and 2009. Thank you, Dana, for that. But I did leave a message and I didn't get a return phone call, nonetheless.
Maybe they could predict what was going to happen.
They should have known that Glenn wanted them to come in tonight.
They should have,
possibly.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you for dropping by to just have a chat about that. I just thought that in the it's one of those mixed subjects, because in the seriousness of what's happening in Christchurch at the moment, it's just interesting to be able to draw that parallel back again to say, okay, it's all well and good for us to look into the future and be driven by what psychics tell us is going to happen.
The bottom line is, look, if you want to look at these magazines and see what the year has in store, please do it with humour and a grain of salt, and know it's written for entertainment purposes only. It is not real. People cannot look magically into the future that has not happened and pluck things out and get it accurately right.
Except after 11 o'clock on this program.
Of course.
And that would be Glenn Wheeler, yes.
Thank you.
Glenn Wheeler, who hasn't twittered. I follow you on Twitter, Glenn. What's going on?
No, I don't tweet. I don't have time to tweet. But thanks for the observation nonetheless. Dr. Rachael Dunlop and Richard Saunders from the Australian Skeptics, and you can check out their website if you want, skeptics.
Absolutely.
Skeptics.com.au.
Yeah, www.skeptics.com.au.
Thanks, guys.
Did you know Jeff Wagg participated in an alien psychic challenge? Did you know that George Hrab is an interstellar singing sensation? For these and other stories you won't hear on the Skeptic Zone, go to the Bolingbrook Babbler. That's www.bolingbrookbabbler.com. If you have any doubts, just remember this: the SGU couldn't debunk any of our stories, even when we offered them $5. So read the Bolingbrook Babbler for the unbelievable truth. That's www.bolingbrookbabbler.com.
Here's former Chief Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics, Barry Williams, talking about our famous Bend Spoon Award, the award given to the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle.
For those who are distinguished in the arts and sciences, there are any number of awards: the Nobel Prize, the Archibald Prize, the Booker Prize, the Eureka Prize, the Logies, and many others. But let's face it, there are at least as many cranks, charlatans and crackpots in the world as there are scientists and artists, so why should they miss out on the big gongs? That is why, back in 1985, we instituted the annual Bend Spoon Award. The award itself is quite a work of art. It consists of a tastefully bent dessert spoon, allegedly by psychic forces, plated with gold originating, or so we have been told, from Lassiter's Lost Reef, and mounted on a polished base made from wood that we have no reason to believe is not from Noah's Ark. Curiously, none of the past winners has managed to extract this handsome trophy from our care, which, we stipulate, must be undertaken only by paranormal means. Not so curious are the reactions of winners when informed of their success. These have ranged from blasé indifference to outrage, and occasionally the sort of colourful language worthy of an Australian fielding in the slips. In selecting a worthy recipient of this award, the judging panel looks for a claim that has received widespread uncritical coverage, that contributes to the dumbing down of society, that has the potential to be either physically or financially harmful to many people, or that preys on the sick and vulnerable. To be successful, they should not be purely local, but be widespread in their influence, and we like to keep them within an Australian context. Past winners have been a pretty eclectic bunch, ranging from psychics wrongly predicting future events, channelled entities, a psychic dentist, various media organisations and identities for promoting such nonsense, government agencies employing psychic archaeologists or accepting sickie certificates from alternative practitioners, a sporting figure promoting energy polarisers to make cars work better, inventors of free energy devices, anti-immunisation activists, and people claiming to have found Noah's Ark, the Colossus of Rhodes, and even one who cited mythical Atlantis in Adelaide. Possibly my favourite past winner was the 1998 award to an institution of higher learning, located in northern New South Wales, that announced a research program into the efficacy of various alternative health methods, while simultaneously offering degree courses in the same methods. A case of putting not only the cart, but also the harness, load and driver before the horse. Most winners have made claims that have difficulty in withstanding any sort of critical analysis or even a small dose of common sense. Our first test is always to apply the dictum, if it sounds too good to be true, it almost certainly is. It's not an infallible test, but it is correct far more often than not. This year we have several nominations for commercial organisations that have pushed ideas based on New Age superstition. One is an insurance company that claimed that driving ability was related to star sign. More common have been companies, including one of the big banks, with their own particular version of feng shui, an ancient Chinese art of aesthetics that has been mystified in its translation into Western practice. These nominees promise that feng shui will promote health, wealth and well-being if incorporated into the design and decor of buildings. Tell that to the investors or creditors of OneTel, which famously designed its offices on the advice of feng shui experts. We also have nominations for various media outlets for their unquestioning acceptance of assorted dubious propositions, often alleging health benefits, and one for the entire economics profession, though we regard that as an incomprehensible rather than a paranormal field. One hopeful nominator has even cited Steve Waugh's notorious attachment to his battered baggy green cap. That's not a likely winner, however, as even skeptics can hold some things sacred, and cricket tradition rates highly with many of us, especially me.
This is Desiree, host of Canadian radio show Skeptically Speaking. For those of you that don't know, Canada's quite similar to Australia. People know us primarily for our weather and our beer, and we have a queen, just like you do. Same one as you do, actually. We also have mythical monsters, and people who think they have psychic abilities, and people who think that vaccinations are bad for you. So keep listening to the Skeptic Zone, and know that we're all in this together.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone this week. Now, all those people who chip in every week with 99 cents, I want you to know that your money has gone to a very good use lately. I've bought our voiceover man, Jim Wilshire, this man.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
I bought him a brand new professional microphone for his birthday, and he's going to be using that to do more recordings for the Skeptic Zone. So thank you, listeners. Thank you to those people who contribute. Your money really does get put to good use. But for now, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.